Okay, hi, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview on Chapter 5 and also discuss the assignment that is coming up. As I read through the assignments, and you probably know this by now, what you should do is probably not just read one response or one posting from up here, but maybe 2 or 3 of them, or maybe even more, just to see which ones you think are better than others. Some of the students always do a little bit better than some of the others. Some of you struggle with grammar, some of you struggle with APA, some of you struggle with understanding the content of the chapter. And by reading what others are writing, that might give you a better idea of how to approach future assignments. We're less than halfway done, so there's plenty of time to catch up. Discussion, post, and peer response, Chapter 5. As always, 3 academic references, not the .coms, .orgs are a little iffy. Websites that aren't coming through the TAMU online database are a little bit iffy, so be careful. Textbooks are definitely iffy, so don't give me weak references. Do a little extra research on these topics, especially in your content area. And you can always do some kind of a search in the library for these concepts and the models and maybe your area of expertise, which might be language arts, English, math, science. You can find comments or articles on these or something else within the chapter that would be helpful, assessment and so forth. Don't use the same references over and over again except for the textbook. Okay, the prompt for this time. How will you assess content development of your students according to this model for the grade level and content area you expect to teach? Those in special education can indicate that additional accommodations might be used. You're getting really close to turning in your unit project, your unit proposal, your differentiated unit proposal. So it'll probably be the same grade level and content area that you're using for that one. So how you assess content development. We're going to talk about content development in a little bit, but there's a section on evaluation. And so read that section over, especially the part about what teachers do and what students do. And what students do is basically will be your basis for your assessment. And how are you going to use the part for what students do in regards to this and with the concepts that are being discussed here in this chapter and this method. Okay, let's go back to and of course I have my cheat sheet here to keep me on track. The title of the chapter is Concept Development Model, Analyzing the Relationships Between Parts of a Concept. So in this model, we're going to go one step farther than we had in Chapter 4. Chapter 4 was identifying, understanding, and knowing concepts. How would you do that? Using an inductive approach, a more constructivist approach. And this time we're working on refining that, going one step further. We'll talk about that. So the basis for the concept development model is basically the same as the one for the concept attainment model, but it goes a little bit further. After you've attained a concept, now how do you develop? How do you refine it? How do you expand on it? And again, this is constructivist, and they mention some of the same people. They mention Piaget and Bruner. And Piaget comes up with schema, which is the building blocks, which is all the little things you know, and then you organize and categorize all these little bits of information so that one connects with another, and you sort of have a web of your understanding. For instance, a dog. There are different kinds of dog, but there's still a dog. And there's different kinds of dogs. So if you named all the different breeds of dogs, you could call them all dog, but then you'd have the different breeds. And are there other animals that are not dogs that are similar to dogs? And could you group those together? And so it's pretty much that process that they're talking about in the concept development model. Now this will not replace the direct instruction we talked about near the beginning. But this will be something that you can use to supplement. And you might do a lesson using this model perhaps after a concept attainment model. Or you can use this by itself, especially in science, perhaps language arts especially. This would be helpful. It might be helpful in mathematics and really any content area you can think of. Even PE, you could have, you could have sports that use balls. And then you have individual sports, team sports, and all these different things. You can use this concept development model in order to refine understanding from among your students. Okay, the steps in the concept development model. Step 1, list as many items as possible that are associated with the subject. In the book, I think they use the example of just things, walking around the school or something, and then you can subdivide those into living and non-living. That's a classical kindergarten or first grade lesson that you would have in science. Now, don't use that one for your discussion post. Use something else. Okay, use something else. Don't just put in there what I have. Don't use the same example as they have in the textbook. Do something else. And so list as many items as possible that are associated with the subject. And so they can do brainstorming, and they talk about doing brainstorming, have a timer and so forth in the chapter, which will be very interesting. And so go ahead and list as many items as possible. You can do that as a class, and then later on the students might be able to take that and maybe, perhaps, most likely in groups, they will go ahead and subdivide those and reorganize these. Group items together because they are alike in some way. Okay, they're alike in some way, which means they're different from others. So those that are alike you put in a group, and others that are alike in another way, you put those in a group. And at some point you can combine groups, or you can even subdivide them even more. And so that's the whole idea here, is that you're grouping things, you're having associations, and then you're thinking about the characteristics that make them alike and those that make them different. And so this is another step in organization. First you attain the concept, and then you further refine it by having the different characteristics that make that up. And there might just be slight differences that would make you have a higher level in the hierarchy, and a second level, third level, and so forth. When you talk about the taxonomy of plants, taxonomy of animals, and so forth, you have the species, the subspecies, and so forth. So then you can label the groups by defining the reasons for the grouping. What do this group have in common? What does this other group have in common? The students might not come up with anything real scientific, and it might be different from what the scientists actually come up with, and that's okay, because they're still learning, and you wouldn't expect as much sophistication from second graders as you would from 12th graders in this regard. Step 4, regroup or subsume individual items or whole groups under other groups. You have good reason sometimes as you come up with your definitions and your descriptions of a particular group to maybe exclude one member of the group, or maybe split it up and reorganize a little bit, and that's fine. That's step 4. And then step 5, synthesize the information by summarizing the data and forming generalizations. Okay, you have your lists. Maybe one group has something a little bit different from another group, and that's okay, because they're not learning to be exact, especially at the lower grades. At the upper grades, they might have to, and you might have to, well, you probably will as the teacher. As you talk about the lesson, you might say that the scientists actually say this or say that, and you're right this way, and your reasoning was good, it was solid, but the scientists know more. I've studied this more. They spent years studying this, and many scientists. And so they might come up with something a little bit different, and you can explain it in that way. But you synthesize the information, summarize the data to form generalizations. And second graders are going to do it in a second grade way. Fourth graders are going to do it in a fourth grade way. 8th graders will do it in an 8th grade way, and 10th graders will do it in a 10th grade way, and of course college students would do it in a college level way, which would be very much more professional, because hopefully you've been doing this all the way from the early grades of elementary school. Now, the Evaluating Learning in the Concept Development Model, they have some good lesson plans in there that should help you. They also have that section on evaluation. Read that over and discuss that. I'm not going to talk too much more about that because you're going to be doing this for your task for your discussion post. If you have any questions, please give me a call.